Masechet Sotah Daf Kaf Daled. We begin the fourth perek. Arusa v'shomeret yavam lo shotot ve'lo notlot ketubah. Shene'emar asher tiste isha tachat isha perat la'arusa v'shomeret yavam. This Mishnah will list lots of exceptions in which a woman either or does not receive her ketubah or cannot drink, or both. As we'll see, different categories. So the first category is arusa. So they're not yet married. They just did kiddushin. That person cannot drink. In other words, if they did kiddushin, and then the husband says, I want you not to be secluded with that man, and then she goes and is secluded with that man. So she does become a sotah. As we'll see, the law of sotah does apply, and so at that point on, they would be prohibited from each other, wouldn't be able to get married. However, because they are not yet married, she cannot drink the bitter waters. Instead, they have to get divorced. You need a divorce after kiddushin, and she does not get a ketubah. This is curious because generally an arusa doesn't receive a ketubah anyway. The obligation of ketubah upon the husband only kicks in once the nisu'in starts. But it could be a case where maybe they stipulate that she would get it even from before. Maybe she would get a basic amount, or maybe she wouldn't get it anyway, so in which case they would just get divorced. But no matter what, she doesn't get a ketubah, and no matter what, she cannot drink. Because the pasuk says, "Asher tiste isha tachat isha." We can look at the context. This is near the end of the parasha, the summary. Zot Torah Takenot, asher tiste isha tachat isha v'nitma'a. This is the ritual of, in cases of jealousy, when a woman, isha, goes astray, tiste, under her husband, ish shela. And so it has to be her husband, the full Sotah ritual, including the drinking, only applies when they are married and not arusa. It also is going to exclude a shomeret yavam. If the husband died without children and now she is awaiting the surviving brother to do yibum, and then the surviving brother, before they have relations, so before the yibum, he says, listen, I don't want you to be with that guy. And then she's with that guy, and then she goes and is secluded with that man. So, once again, there will be some law of sotah, to the extent that they will be prohibited from each other, the yavam and the shomeret yavam. However, she should not be made to drink. The drinking will not do anything. She will not receive a ketubah. Normally, she would get a ketubah. The surviving brother has to pay her ketubah from the inheritance of the deceased man. But if she goes and is secluded, she will lose out her ketubah, and there's no way for her to prove her innocence by drinking. And once again, the source is because the drinking only applies when they are married. She has to be isha, so she cannot prove her innocence, but she did do something wrong, so she will lose her ketubah. Okay, almana lekohen gadol, girusha v'chalusa lekohen hedyot. Other, now the next category are forbidden marriages. They are valid marriages, right? If a kohen gadol does kiddushin and nisuin with an almana, he's prohibited to be married to her, but it is a halachic marriage. Similarly, with a girusha chalutza to a regular kohen, a girusha that's midoraita, chalutza is midrabanan, but either way they're not allowed to be married. Mamzeret. Unetina Israel, a mamzer, a child of Arayot, or netina is one of the descendants of the Gibeonites who tricked Bnei Israel, and therefore had a ban on them marrying into the nation. Or whether she is a mamzer or he is a mamzer, married to a Jewish woman, a regular kosher woman. Lo shotot ve'lo notelot ketubah. In these cases also, because the marriage the whole time was prohibited anyway, so therefore they do not. If one of these in the marriages, the man makes his wife a sotah, she cannot drink. I mean, the point of drinking would be so that then they can go and continue to remain married should she be found innocent. But we don't want them to be married. And also, she does not get a ketubah. And that's because she cannot drink, and therefore she cannot prove her innocence. So, the same as any other woman who does not drink, but she did seclude herself, so she does not get a ketubah. Now, ve'elu lo shotot ve'lo notolot ketubah. Another category who, similar to the previous, also do not drink and do not receive a ketubah. But this applies to the previous category was forbidden marriages. This applies to regular marriages. העומדת טמאה אני ושבאו לה עדים שהיא טמאה ועומדת איני שותה. So a regular husband and wife are permitted to each other, and then she becomes a sotah, and then after becoming a sotah, she admits, I sinned. So because she sinned, there's no point in going ahead and drinking. The whole drinking is to prove that she is guilty. She said she's guilty. Or that witnesses came and said, we saw her sinning, cohabiting with that guy. So then we know she's guilty. So she would get divorced and she loses her ketubah. Or if she says, I don't want to drink. She's not admitting guilt, but she's refusing to drink. By refusing to drink, like, why wouldn't you drink if you're innocent? So we assume guilt. So all these cases, she doesn't drink and she loses her ketubah. Amar ba'ala eni mashke v'sheba'ala ba'aleh baderech notelot ketubah velo shotot. On the other hand, if it's the husband's fault, he says, I feel bad for my wife. You know what? I called her a sotah. I was jealous. I was in a really bad mood. But now I don't want her to drink. So because he is not going ahead with the process, she has no way to prove her innocence. She would drink and prove her innocence. He's the one not allowing it. Therefore, she deserves her ketubah. So when she doesn't drink, she gets her ketubah. And also, if the husband cohabits with her on the way, he's not allowed to. If he does that, that's also his fault. So she shouldn't lose her ketubah because his fault. They have to get divorced, but she collects her ketubah. מתו בעליהן עד שלא שתו, בית שמאי אומרים נוטלות כתובה ולא שותות, בית הלל אומרים או שותות או לא נוטלות כתובתן. If the husband made his wife a sotah, and then he died in the meantime, before she drank the water. According to Bet Shammai, she gets her ketubah and does not drink. It's the same as the previous cases. It's his fault that he died. I mean, in other words, she would go ahead and drink, but now the husband's not around, and the husband's the one that has to initiate. You need a husband there to make her a sotah and to continue the process. If he's not around, so the process stops short, and she doesn't have a chance to prove her innocence, but that's not her problem, so she shouldn't lose her ketubah. She doesn't drink. She does get her ketubah according to Bet Shammai. Bet Hillel says, actually, she could drink. The husband started the process, and so she could finish it off and drink and prove her innocence and collect her ketubah if she wants. Or if she wants and doesn't want to drink, then she will just lose out on her ketubah, as the same as if the husband was alive. She would have the same choices. Now, if you have a woman who divorced her husband, or he died, but she is pregnant, or she is nursing. So the law is she should not marry another man before that kid is 2 years old. Because if she gets married while she is pregnant, then that might endanger her pregnancy by being with another man. Also be a problem to figure out who the father is. And if she's nursing, then she might become pregnant from the second husband, and that will dry up her milk, spoil her milk, and that will endanger the child. They didn't have formula back then. And so the rabbi said she's not allowed to be marry again before the kid is 2 years old. Now let's say she does. She marries some guy, and that guy makes her a sotah, so she will not drink and does not get a ketuvah because it's a prohibited marriage, like the case of up here, that lo shotot velo notlot ketubah, because they're not even allowed to be with each other. So don't drink because this is a prohibited marriage. We want you we don't want you to go back to her, and she can't prove her innocence. And therefore, she loses her ketubah. That's according to the Meir. Chachamim omrim, yacholu lefrisha lachazira lachar zaman. Chachamim say this is not a permanent prohibited marriage, only temporary. So since they can separate until 2 years are up, and then they can come back together. Therefore, it's not a prohibited marriage, and there's no reason that she should not drink. that she cannot drink. So, according to Chachamim, she is Sotah, let her drink, prove her innocence, and then after 2 years, the kid's 2 years old, then they'll come back together. This is not the same as the prohibited marriages before. It's only a temporary prohibition. Next case, Ailonit uzkena v'she'ena re'uya leled lo notlot ketubah ve'lo shotot. According to Tanakama, all these women who cannot have a child. Ailonit is a woman who cannot bear a child, even though she's an adult, but she never fully developed. She has some male characteristics like a deep voice, some hormonal imbalance. And or a woman who is too old to have children, or for whatever reason cannot have a child. So this is another example of a prohibited marriage. A husband, the man, he has an obligation to have children, piru urvu, and now he's married to a woman who cannot have children. So therefore, this is another example of a marriage that since it's a problematic marriage, so we don't allow her to drink, and because she cannot drink and prove her innocence, she loses her ketubah. Rabbi Elazar, on the other hand, says that's not a problem. The husband can marry another woman and have children from that woman, so he'd be permitted. If he has another wife who can have children, so he's fulfilling Piru. Or a different case that the Mishnah doesn't mention, let's say he had children already when he was younger from a different marriage, so he fulfilled Piru, and then later in life he wants to marry an older woman. And that's a permitted marriage because he already fulfilled Piru. And so since he can either have already fulfilled Piru, or he can currently fulfill Piru with another woman, so this marriage is not prohibited, and therefore she can drink the Sotah waters like a regular marriage. Ushar kol hanashim o shotot o lo notlot ketubah. In all other cases, just regular cases of permitted marriages, when there's no overriding issue, a woman has a choice. She can drink, and if she knows that she's innocent, she go ahead and drink, and that's not a problem, and that'll prove her innocence, and then the marriage will continue, and she will get her ketubah at the end of the marriage. Or she can choose, I don't want to drink, and I'll lose out the ketubah. Eshet kohen shotah motet ba'ala, eshet saris shotah. And the same regular case is also true for an eshet kohen. The Gemara will talk about why you might have thought otherwise. Eshet kohen is only different from eshet Yisrael in that, well, both are the same. If a woman willingly commits adultery, she cannot go back to either husband. But if it's unwilling, if a woman is raped, then she cannot go back to a Kohen husband. She can go back to a Yisrael husband. So perhaps we might have thought there's some difference there. But anyway, Eshet Kohen also, even though she was suspected of being with another man and was secluded with another man, if she drinks and nothing happens, she can go back to her Kohen husband. And also, if a woman is married to a eunuch, a man who's sterile, and she also can go back to him. This would have to be, we're going to see in a second that there's a law that the Sotah only works if the husband and wife cohabited together at least once, and only then she's suspected of being with someone else. So we would have to say that this man, the husband, became a saris after they were first married. They cohabited at least once, and only afterwards she became a Sotah. Al yedeh kol arayot mekanin chutz min hakatan umimi she'eno ish. Now, a husband can give a warning to his wife, don't be with that man, and that can include any man, including an erva. If husband says to his wife, I don't want you to be alone, secluded with your father or your brother, even though those are arayot, and we don't, and the person is permitted to have yichud with a relative like that, but husband says, I don't like the way that you're relating to each other. So that's a valid Sotah. If she is secluded with her brother, then she will be, and there's witnesses, then she'll become a Sotah. However, it does not work. A husband cannot cause his wife to be a Sotah by giving her a warning that she should not be with a minor. A minor under 9 at least cannot even have relations, and a being that is not a person, for example, an animal. Husband cannot say, I don't want you to be with this pet. So that does not, the law of Sotah does not apply in those cases. Ve'elu shebet din mekanin lahen, mi shenitchadesh ba'ala o nishtata, o she'ah havush bebet ha'asurin. Now in the following cases, the husband is not mentally competent to make his wife a Sotah, but the Bet Din can step in and do it on his behalf. Right? The Bet Din sees, oh, she is secluding herself with this guy, and it's not good. So the Bet Din can warn her, or if he is either deaf or is not sane, or he's in prison. So he's in prison, he can't get to her, but the Bet Din can step in and give the warning and make her a Sotah on his behalf. Now this would not really make her a full Sotah to the extent that she would drink the waters, but it would make it sufficient that she would lose her ketubah. The Bet Din says, oh, we saw you do this, and therefore you lose out your ketubah. Rabbi Yosef omer aflash kota. Rabbi Yosef disagrees and says, even to make her drink, once the husband either gets better or he gets out of jail. So therefore the Bet Din can start off the process, give her the warning, and make her a Sotah. Then when the husband gets out of jail, the Bet Din says, listen, we did this on your behalf because you weren't around, but we saw her doing this improper activity. Then the husband can decide to go ahead with the rest and cause her to drink. All right, that's all the Mishnah. Now the Gemara is going to analyze the first case, that a Arusa or Shomeret Yavam can become a Sotah, but don't drink. They cannot drink. Mishtahu de la shatya hakanui mekanela. We infer this from the language of the Mishnah. The Mishnah says they don't drink. Okay, fine, they can't drink to prove their innocence, but they do become a Sotah to the extent that they become prohibited and she will lose her ketubah. What's the source? Tetanur banan daber el bnei Israel v'amarta lerabot Arusa v'shomeret yavam lekinoi. First it says, go tell Bnei Israel, and then it says ve'amarta, an extra word. Why does it have to say ve'amarta? You're adding a case, so that includes Arusa and shomeret yavam for the warning. They can be warned, and they will become a Sotah because they are warned and thereby prohibited to their husbands, even though they can't drink. Okay, so that's how we learned it. Now, Matnitin Maneh, who is the author of our Mishnah? Rabbi Yonatan hi detanya. It's going to be Rabbi Yonatan, the second opinion in the following Baraita, that teaches Tachat Ishech Perat la Arusa. It says that if a man was with you while you were married, Tachat Ishech. So that means that the Sotah only applies when she is married to a man. But if they only did Kiddushin, that's not called an Isha. And therefore, an Arusa does not drink. Yachol shani mosi af shomeret yavam tamud lomar ish ish debre Rabbi Yoshia. So now I might think, well, if an Arusa does not drink, then maybe shomeret yavam also doesn't drink. Arusa and shomeret yavam are similar in that both are half married. Arusa, he did something, but not quite yet. Shomeret yavam, they're even almost married, that they just have to cohabit. And then they'll be fully married, even without any intention. It doesn't matter what their intention is for a Yavam and Shomeret Yavam. Once they are together, then they become fully married. So I might think that also it would be the same. No, therefore the Pasuk says in the beginning of the parasha, ish, any person, that's an inclusive word. So according to the Rabbi Yoshia, that includes a Shomeret Yavam. According to the Rabbi Yoshia, a Shomeret Yavam can become a full Sotah, even to drink. So included even to drink. So our Mishnah is not the opinion of Rabbi Yoshia, because Rabbi Yoshia only says that an Arusa does not drink, but a Shomeret Yavam does drink. Rather, our Mishnah follows Rabbi Yonatan Omer, Tachat Ishech, Perat le Shomeret Yavam. He learns from the same words, Tachat Ishech, that you strayed under your husband, while under your husband. He learns from that to exclude a Shomeret Yavam. that she does not drink. He would consider Shomeret Yavam less married because Yavam didn't even do anything. His brother just died. He was just sitting there. But so automatically he has this zikah, this obligation. But he didn't do any act to take her. So he has less of a connection to her, according to the Bionatan, and therefore she does not drink in that case. Now we ask, maybe we should exclude the Shomeret Yavam. She can't drink, but not exclude an Arusa, because an Arusa and Arusa have a stronger connection. So maybe if a man makes his Arusa a Sotah, that she would drink. Can you think that? No, because Talmud Lomar, Asher tiste isha tachat isha perat la arusa. So this pasuk, that only if it's a woman under her husband, that's when Sotah applies, but it will not apply to an arusa. So that an arusa does not drink. So therefore, Rabbi Yonatan, he learns from Tachat Ishech, Shomeret Yavam, does not drink, and from Asher tiste Isha, Tachat Isha, he learns that an arusa does not drink. So therefore, according to Rabbi Yonatan, neither Shomeret Yavam or arusa drink. That's the Mishnah. So the author of our Mishnah is Rabbi Yonatan and is not Rabbi Yoshia, because he only excluded arusa from drinking, but he said a Shomeret Yavam does drink. Okay, now let's analyze these two opinions. Mod Ali male arusa de kiddushe dide vesolkin al yado. Rabbi Yonatan, the second sage here, he thinks that the connection of an arus to an arusa is stronger than that between a yavam and Shomeret Yavam. Why? Because number one, he did kiddushin. He went and actively said, I want you to be my wife. Whereas the Yavam, he did nothing. His brother just happened to die. So he did no active step. And furthermore, if an arusa should commit adultery, she gets sikila. It's very serious. Whereas if a Shomeret Yavam goes and is with another man besides the Yavam, that's only a lav. There's no sikila there. And so you see that connection is stronger, and he assumes that that's stronger since when you have one pasuk, Tachat Ishech, he says, well, who should we exclude? You're going to exclude the weaker of the two. So the weaker of the two is Shomeret Yavam. And that's why we ask, okay, fine, exclude Shomeret Yavam, but the stronger one maybe we should include. And that's why he needs a different pasuk. Whereas Rabbi Yoshia Umor Ali Male Shomeret Yavam de la mehasera mesira lahupa. Whereas Rabbi Yoshia, he assumes that a Shomeret Yavam is a stronger connection. That's why when he has that same pasuk Tachat Ishech, he said, well, it should exclude the weaker of the two. Who's the weaker? The Arus and Arusa is a weaker connection, and that's why she doesn't drink. But Shomeret Yavam and Yavam are stronger. In what way are they stronger? Because Yavam and Shomeret Yavam, they don't have to go to a chuppah to get fully married. All they need is to have relations, even if it doesn't matter what their intention. Even if their intention is promiscuous, but they have relations, they are fully married. Not true for Arus and Arusa. If they only did Kiddushin, then they have to do Chuppah. What is Chuppah? It's a big machloket till today. What Chuppah is. Could be you have to do some kind of ceremony, some kind of bringing her into his home. Could be the Sheva Barachot themselves. It could be relations, but the relations have to be with intention, not for promiscuity, but rather for nisuin. And so therefore, since Yavam and Shomeret Yavam are more easily married, their connection is stronger. And so that's why the Yoshia assumed that we're gonna Shomeret Yavam is going to be so that's why he assumed that Arusa is going to be the first one to be kicked out, that she does not drink. Good. Now, Rabbi Yonatan, hi ish my avid le. Question, Rabbi Yonatan, Rabbi Yoshia used the word ish, that pasuk, to include Shomeret Yavam, that Shomeret Yavam does drink. Now, that's an inclusive phrase. What's Rabbi Yonatan going to do with that inclusive phrase? Because he actually excludes everyone. So, my avidle mi ba'iled rabot eshet haresh ve'eshet shoteh ve'eshet shi'amum. He is going to use that to include the wife of someone who is deaf, or not sane, or shimum is even worse than not sane, like vegetative state. It means literally just a boring person, but very, very boring. That he's not functioning at all. That in all those cases, the court can step in and make his wife a sotah on his behalf. So that's included ish, anyone, even someone who is not functioning. Rabbi Yoshia hay tachat isha may avid le, and now the other way around, this tachat isha, which Rabbi Yonatan used to exclude arusa, that arusa does not drink, but Rabbi Yoshia used that already excluded arusa from the tachat ishech. So what is he going to use? What is he going to exclude with this pasuk? Miba'ele ish leisha veisha leish. He's going to use that, since it says isha and isha, ishela, back to back. We're going to make a connection between them and learn that some of the laws that apply to him apply to her, and her to him. In the case of Sotah, we'll see this later on Daf Kaf Zayin. Ela tama dechetivi hani kera'eh ha lav hachi havamina arusa shatya. Ki ata bi acha bar chanina midaroma ata ve'atae ve'aite matnita bideh. Now, so far, so good, but here's going to be a question. According to both of these opinions, they have this pasuk, right? One pasuk or another, whichever one you're going to use, to exclude an arusa. That an arusa cannot drink. They all agree that an arusa cannot drink. And they learn it from one pasuk or the other. So that means without that pasuk, I would have thought that an arusa does drink. Hold on, I have a challenge, because when Rabbi Acha came from the south, he lived in Lod, where the airport is, and he came up to the north, he brought the following teaching with him. Mibal ade ishech, mi shekadma shechivat baal laboel, velo shekadma shechivat boel mi labaal. Since the pasuk says, besides your husband, let's look at the pasuk inside. It's up here. Ve'at kisati tachat ishech. This is part of what the Kohen is saying to her in the oath. Because you went astray under your husband, and some other man, the alleged adulterer, was with you, put his seed in you, besides your husband. So besides your husband. So we learn from this that in order for a sotah to be valid, the sotah ritual to be valid, the husband has to be with her first, and only then she becomes a sotah, and she is warned, and she goes and seclude with someone else, right? But the husband and wife do have to sleep together first. Now, this is a problem because there's a problem for us because arusa, they're not together first. Arusa, all they did was kiddushin. He gave her a ring or a coin or a shtad, right? And that's it. And then they were not together. And so how could you ever have a sotah if they were not yet together? By definition, an arusa, the husband and wife were not together, certainly not as a husband and wife, and therefore she wouldn't be able to be a sotah no matter what, and you don't need those other pisukim. And we answer, let's say they did have relations before they're married. When he came over to his in-law's house, where she is currently living because they're not married yet, and they had promiscuous relations, which can happen. We saw that in Yehuda, that was actually the practice, because when the Greek general would come and take all brides, so they would go and preempt. So, and anyway, if this does happen, that's why you need the Pesukim. This would be an interesting case, because that means that the Torah is giving you a law, is saying an arus is excluded from drinking, and the Torah needs to tell you that for a case where they acted improperly and the arus had relations with his arusa before they were married. So the Torah is giving you a law in a case of improper behavior, which would be interesting. Okay, but anyway, that's Rami Bar Chama's answer. Yes, it is possible that the husband and wife that this arus and arusa did have relations, and therefore, based on that criteria, she could become a sotah. That's why we need a different pasuk to say, no, an arusa does not drink. Now we ask about that. Hold on, according to the Yonatan, at least, who says that Shomeret Yavam also does not drink. How would we apply the same logic to a Shomeret Yavam? Kegon, Shaba le Yavam bebet hamiha. So you're going to say the same thing. The Yavam and Shomeret Yavam, they were never together. And so, how could Shomeret Yavam ever be a sotah? So why do you need a pasuk, Rabbi Yonatan, to exclude a Shomeret Yavam? And if you tell me, I'll say the same thing, that the Yavam went and had relations with the Shomeret Yavam while she was still in her parents' home. That can't be. HaShomeret Yavam karitla ishto malyatahi. You wouldn't call her Shomeret Yavam anymore. You call them married, because yibum works even if you have no intention to do yibum, any intention, and even promiscuous relations makes them married. So they're not Shomeret Yavam anymore. That would be a full marriage. They had relations. They're fully married. So of course she would be a sotah. There wouldn't be a case of Shomeret Yavam anymore. Tehama kana lakol, because after all, the Rav said that Yavam and Shomeret Yavam, who are together, even if they didn't have intention to do yibum, if they had relations, he acquires her for all matters. They are fully married. And so now we have a problem, because you could not apply the same logic that you answered for arusa to a Shomeret Yavam. And our answer is Kiddush Shmuel Damar Lo Kana Ela Ladvarim Ha'amurim B'Parasha. According to Shmuel, if the Yavam and the Yavama have intention to do Yibum, then they're fully married. But if they do not have intention when they have relations, but rather just for promiscuous relations, then according to Shmuel, they are not fully married for all matters, only for a couple of matters that are mentioned, like that the Yavam can inherit, and that he can give a get. He doesn't have to do chalitza if they want to separate, but they're not fully married yet, according to Shemuel. And therefore, according to Shemuel, this would be we still need a pasuk to exclude Shomeret Yavam, because you could have a case of Yavam and Shomeret Yavam where they have promiscuous relations and then they are still not fully married. And so you might think that the Sotah law would apply to them because they had relations before the suspected adulterer, and that's why I need a pasuk to exclude and say, no, not Shomeret Yavam, because they're not fully married. Okay, good. Lema Rav Damar Kerebi Yoshia Ushmuel Damar Kerebi Yonatan. Now we try to line up the machloket we had between two Amoraim, Rav and Shemuel, about whether a Yabam and Shomeret Yavam who are with each other without intention to do Yibum, are they fully married? Rav says yes, Shmuel says no. We're going to try to line up that machloket Amoraim with the machloket of Tanaim between Rabbi Yoshia and Rabbi Yonatan. And the logic would work as follows. According to Rav, Yavam and Yavama who have promiscuous relations are fully married. And that's why they would agree with Rabbi Yoshia, who says that a Shomeret Yavam does drink. Because we're talking about a Shomeret Yavam where they had relations, and therefore they're fully married, and that's why she will drink. Whereas Shemuel, he would agree with Rabbi Yonatan, because Shemuel says a Yavam and Shomeret Yavam who have promiscuous relations are not fully married. Because they're not fully married, so she's not going to drink. And that would agree with Rabbi Yonatan, who also says that a Shomeret Yavam does not drink. So it looks like we can line them up. But then we say, actually not necessarily. Amar lach Rav, ana damre afilu l'Rabbi Yonatan, midistrikela ma'almauta mikelal d'ishto malyata hi. Rav says, I can explain my position. I don't want to be stuck into only one or the other. I can explain my position even according to Rabbi Yonatan, And why so? If a Yavam and Shomeret Yavam who have any relations at all are fully married, then she should be able to drink. So he says that's precisely why Rabbi Yonatan requires a pasuk, right? Because without the pasuk, I would have said, oh, they're fully married. In other words, there can be a case of Yavam and Shomeret Yavam that are fully married. And that's why you need the pasuk to say, hold on, you still cannot drink as a sotah until you do a proper yibum. She does not drink. That's precisely why I need the pasuk. That's how Rav will explain himself. Either way, Ushmuel amar ana damre afilu Rabbi Yoshia b'distrikel Rabuya miklal delav ishto hi kelal. And Shemuel similarly says, I can explain my position even according to Rabbi Yoshia, because according to Shemuel, again, we established that we're talking about a case where they had promiscuous relations, the Yavam and the Shomeret Yavam, and according to Shemuel, they're not married. They're not fully married anyway. So really, in that case, we would already assume that a shomeret, without a pasuk, we would assume that since they're not fully married, she would not drink. Right? They're not fully married, so therefore she would not drink. And that's why we need the pasuk, ish, to come to include a shomeret yavam and say she does drink. That's Rabbi Yoshia's position, that a shomeret yavam does drink. Precisely, we need the pasuk, precisely because otherwise, they would not be fully married if they only had promiscuous relations. And so, even though by logic, yes, you're right, you can line them up, but once we explain that actually that's why we need the pasuk, so we need the pasuk to override that logical conclusion that we would have thought without the pasukim. Baruch Adonai Olam, Amen ve'amen.